Was Edward III's legacy a glorious tapestry of conquest or a tangled mess of debt and despair? Did the Black Prince truly embody chivalry, or was he a ruthless instrument of war? And what happened to a dynasty that once seemed destined to rule Europe, swallowed by disease, bankruptcy, and simmering rebellion? The year is 1367. A baby boy born under the auspicious sign of Twelfth Night was hailed as a future king. James IV of Majorca, King Richard of Armenia, three powerful men, all gathered at court, watched with hopeful eyes as this little one Edward took his first steps. It was a potent omen, a whispered promise of greatness, a perfect start for his father Henry as he prepared for a campaigning season that would reshape the map of Europe. Henry, a man consumed by ambition and the desire to reclaim lost territories, had a formidable ally in his eldest son, John of Gaunt. Together, they forged an army, a motley crew of Gascon mercenaries and paid soldiers, a river of men flowing across the Pyrenees, down past the sleepy town of Logrono, towards the banks of the Nájera River. There, waiting like a coiled serpent, was Henry of Trastamara, a staunch Castilian nobleman determined to defend his land. The Black Prince, Edward's brother, stood at the very heart of this military machine. He was a legend in his own time, a whirlwind of steel and strategy, a warrior whose name was synonymous with victory. But this campaign wasn't about glory, it was about survival. Charles V, the French king, had issued a chilling warning. The flower of the chivalry of the world was assembled on the Castilian side: Sir John Chandos, Stephen Cusington, and Gichard Dangle, a formidable line of knights ready to meet the English charge. As the English army descended from the Pyrenees, a remarkable event occurred. 200 new knights, eager to prove their worth, were sworn into the ranks, their armor gleaming under the Spanish sun. Then, it happened. A surprise attack, swift and brutal, shattered the Franco-Castilian lines. Early on April 3rd, English divisions, like a sudden storm, slammed into the enemy's left flank, throwing the carefully laid plans into chaos. The air filled with the thunder of longbows, a relentless rain of arrows that tore through the ranks, followed by the furious charge of dismounted men at arms. Henry of Trastamara, caught completely off guard, panicked. Instead of retreating, he dug in along the riverbank, desperately attempting to hold the line, a direct contradiction to Charles V's explicit orders. The battle was a massacre. At least 5,000 men, soldiers, nobles, and civilians were slaughtered or drowned in the swollen river. Henry fled, a desperate scramble for survival, while his key lieutenant, Du Guesclin, was captured, along with nearly every other nobleman on the Franco-Castilian side. It was a tactical masterpiece for the Black Prince, a resounding victory that echoed across the continent. But the spoils of war were a bitter pill to swallow. The hostages, a glittering collection of royal family members, were impressive, but they didn't bring in the wealth needed to pay off the staggering debts. Pedro the Cruel, the deposed king of Castile, was unable to raise the funds to repay his savior, Edward. The Black Prince, once the most celebrated warrior in Europe, was now drowning in a sea of debt, besieged by the demands of the Gascon lords who expected their wages. Even the sale of Pedro's jewels and the ransoms from the captured hostages couldn't stem the tide. The cost of war, it seemed, was simply too high. But the battlefield wasn't the only place where disaster lurked. As the English army retreated back to Bordeaux, a silent, insidious enemy followed: infection and disease. The Black Death, though at its peak in 1348 and 1349, still cast a long shadow. Edward's soldiers, weary and exposed, succumbed to dysentery, a relentless plague that spread through the ranks like wildfire. The great and the humble alike suffered, their bodies ravaged by illness, and then the Black Prince himself fell ill. Possibly dysentery, perhaps malaria, or more likely dropsy, a debilitating swelling of the limbs, confined him to bed for the rest of his life. A preacher, in a moment of unsettling prophecy, declared him the Son of God, a chilling reminder of the fragility of even the most powerful men. As Edward lay weakened, he reflected on his own fate, fearing that his glorious deeds would be forgotten, reduced to nothing by the relentless march of time and sickness. The victory at Nájera, while strategically brilliant, unleashed a chain of political and personal catastrophes. Aquitaine, the heart of the English possessions in France, was left vulnerable and impoverished. The Gascon lords, enraged by the lack of payment and the continued pressure of English rule, appealed to Charles V, demanding the French king to launch a new war against the Plantagenets. Charles predictably responded with enthusiasm. French troops massed on the borders of Aquitaine, and soon, hundreds of towns declared their allegiance to the French cause. Large swathes of the principality were overrun, a stark reminder of the English predicament. Meanwhile, in Castile, Henry of Trastamara, the victor at Nájera, engaged in a dark and brutal act. In March 1369, he murdered his half-brother Pedro in a tent with a dagger. Almost immediately, he signed a treaty with Charles V, securing a massive war fleet to sail along the Gascon coast, a direct threat to English shipping and a chilling demonstration of Castilian power. Panic spread throughout Gascony and even reached England, where the threat of a French invasion was once again perceived. The futility of the Castilian campaign was laid bare, a devastating indictment of the English strategy and leadership. By 1370, Edward was a broken man, too ill to rally his forces and defend his lands. He made preparations to return to England, carrying with him the remnants of his army and a profound sense of defeat. But the troubles didn't end with the Black Prince's illness and the loss of Aquitaine. Back in England, the fortunes of the royal family took a dark turn. Lionel of Antwerp, the Duke of Clarence, struggled to maintain order in Ireland, a region that had resisted English rule for centuries. His first wife, Elizabeth de Bourgh, had died in 1363, leaving him with a daughter, Philippa. By 1366, he abandoned the Irish campaign, recognizing it as a lost cause. Edward III, in a calculated move, arranged a marriage for Lionel, a purely mercenary agreement, to Violante Visconti, a 13-year-old heiress from Milan. The wedding was a lavish affair, attended by the poet Petrarch, but the opulent lifestyle proved fatal. Within months, Lionel succumbed to illness and died in Piedmont. His body eventually returned to England for burial. Queen Philippa, Edward's wife, was also declining. A hunting accident in 1357 had left her with a permanently damaged shoulder, and she relied on a litter and barge for even the simplest journeys. By 1369, she died at the age of 39, Edward and their teenage son, Thomas of Woodstock, by her side. The Queen, who had arrived in England just 4 days after Edward II's funeral, had witnessed the transformation of her husband and family from puppets of the Mortimer-Isabella regime to the most feared dynasty in Europe. She had lived a life of unimaginable wealth and luxury, a patron of the arts and a skilled diplomat. As Thomas Walsingham, a chronicler of the era, wrote, she was admirably connected to the noble families of Europe and brought glamour and chivalry to the court with foreign knights, whom she integrated into English society with unprecedented success. Her dying wish, as recounted by Froissart, was for the king to settle her debts to foreign merchants. Her loss left Edward devastated. The king himself was consumed by illness. From the middle of the decade, he relied increasingly on expensive surgeons and doctors, a grim reflection of a man nearing the end of his life. As his family and friends drifted away, Edward retreated into a secluded household, his health and vitality fading with each passing day. He was outliving the era of his greatest victories, a poignant reminder of the fleeting nature of power and glory. Yet, driven by a sense of duty and a desperate need to assert his authority, he prepared to fight once more. In a parliament of 1369, the records state, it was agreed by all the prelates and magnates and commons of the shires of England, with the assent of the whole parliament, that the King of England should resume the name of King of England and of France as he held it before the peace. The peace was officially abandoned. The sickly, grieving Edward, aided by his beleaguered eldest son, was determined to rally his country for a new round of war. But did this resurgence of ambition truly represent a return to greatness, or merely a desperate attempt to cling to a fading legacy? Was Edward's reign ultimately a tragedy of wasted potential, a cautionary tale of ambition, debt, and disease? And as the echoes of Nájera and countless other battles reverberated across the continent, what future awaited the Plantagenet dynasty? A dynasty that had once seemed destined to rule Europe, now teetering on the brink of collapse.